All right, great. Here we are. What's up, whoever's watching this video? I'm Brosty. This is Leaf. He's learning the course. There's Chilla. She's chilling. We're going to go over the NEOS beginner course, where we go over the developer tool, material tool, inspectors, and parenting. There's going to be 3 parts to this. First part, we're going to talk about game objects in the developer tooltip at kind of like entry level. We're going to go talk about the inspector, which has a whole bunch of shit on it. And then we're going to go and check out the parenting, which is like a really important concept in game development in general, which being as NEOS is basically a playable game engine is really important. So let's talk about with game objects. Everything in NEOS is a game object. So I'm going to go get my developer tooltip and check this out. My head is a game object. Your head's a game object.
Oh, God.
The world's a game object. If I pull out the radial menu, it's a game object. This gizmo over here, it's a game object. It's all game objects. The whole
game
world.
Objects all the way down.
It's all game objects all the way down. It's kind of like the big fundamental concept about what makes NEOS versus, say, VR chat. VR chat, it's like you have worlds and you have avatars. And meanwhile here in NEOS, the concept is game objects. Everything's a game object. Your avatar is a game object with a whole bunch of game objects in it. The world's game object with a bunch of game objects in it. So that's like the fundamental sort of philosophy of it. Now, the thing about game objects is they have a whole bunch of properties in it. And so I want to show that very quickly. So I can select it, and I can go and pull up Open Inspector in my radial menu, which we'll get to in a moment, Leaf. We'll go into detail what these are and when we get to the inspector. But the key thing I'm pointing out is that a game object has all this data on it that's accessible, and you can get that in the inspector. So the thing about game objects is there's some configurations of game objects that are very common to use in game development. We call these prefabs. So you can go and do that. You go into Essential Tools, double click on that, and you'll see at the bottom right corner, you'll see this golden, looking tip. That thing's called the Dev Tooltip. You're gonna want to go spawn that thing. This is what most of this course is going to be about, is this tooltip. This is your bread and butter for anything involving game objects. I mentioned about prefabs. Well, I'm going to go make the most common one you're probably ever going to do. So this box has, just like this over here, this NEOS beginner's course picture. It's got a whole bunch of properties that, if I select an Open Inspector, we got a whole bunch of properties on it. Pretty much this course, a lot of what we're going to be doing is going through what is in this prefab. There's a whole bunch of components in here that we'll talk about later that's automatically put on here. And that's kind of the beauty of prefabs. It's all set up. So I know I kind of, did a very gloss over sort of pass over this information, but, it's time for questions. Do you have any questions, Leaf?
How do I make a box?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing that in the next section. Again, I know we're very glossy right now. So this is where it turns into a workshop where, I do something and you do something. And that includes you, the mysterious viewer of this video. You too should do these things. Literally do it. I'll say that about 40% of what you're going to learn today is going to be about these concepts, these informational concepts. But 60% of it literally comes down to you mechanically doing this stuff. That said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to learn how to use the developer tooltip. So first, equipping. Well, Leaf, you already have it equipped, but did you know there's another way to equip it? So you clicked on it, right? If you go click on it, you see equip tool. You can do that. But there's also a swaggier way to do it that Chilla showed me. And that's you grab it and you pull in and it just equips.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, right? More you know. So de-equipping, you can either use your radial menu and you can hit dequip. That works. The other way, and this is like really good to know, is that you have a tool shelf on your left and right hand on your avatar. And you're going to, if you go and click on there, it'll go and dequip that tool and put it down there. So go ahead and go into your, essential tools, and go spawn the material tool, the material tip, which is in like the top right corner. Should look like that. And so go ahead and equip it, and you have your developer tooltip on your tool shelf. If you click the developer tooltip on that tool shelf, it'll just swap it. So it'll take care of equipping and dequipping for you. This is like a really good workflow thing to know about for messing around with different tooltips, because it makes things go a lot faster.
You can put other stuff on the tool shelf as well, and you can use both sides.
Yeah, you can use both sides of the tool shelf. So, don't restrict yourself to one side. So now let's go make our first prefab. So Leaf, here we go. So here's how you go do it. You have your developer tooltip equipped, and you're gonna open up your radial menu, and you'll see create new in the top right corner. Click on that. And you can see there's a whole bunch of different categories of stuff we can do. Right now, we're going to go to 3D model, and we're going to click on box. Voila. There you go. It's a prefab. So this is the box thing we were talking about. It's really important to know how to select stuff. The way you do it is you click the secondary button on your control stick. Secondary button on your controller. Like Valve Index, it's the trackpad. So whatever button the secondary action is, that's to select. So you'll see that you get this like purple outline to it. And as far as deselecting goes, you can open up your radial menu. In the bottom left corner, you can click deselect all. And that deselects...
That deselects everything, but if you want to deselect one thing, you can just press secondary on the selected object again.
Oh, let me try that. Yeah, so you can do that. Thank you, Chilla. There is something very important to know. NEOS is not a perfect game. And sometimes you select something, and for whatever reason, you can't select it again. When that happens, the best solution I have is go select something else, and deselect everything, and then go and try to select the object again. Sometimes you just can't select the object again. It's weird. You don't actually have to grab the cube, by the way. That's something Chilla pointed out. You can literally just hit the secondary button and just select it, which is nice. So you have it selected. Now we're going to open up the inspector. So on the right side of your radial menu, there's open inspector, and you get that lovely menu full of information. So we're going to talk about gizmos and what they do before we talk, more about what's inside the inspector. So if you take a step back from your selected object, then you'll notice that there's these boxes that appear above your box, and all these things do different stuff. The main ones we're concerned with right now. Yeah, scale, rotation, and position. So, when you go and open up initially, you'll see that it's on position. You can see by these arrows that are pointing. If I grab them, they change position. And if you hit the circular, globe-looking one, that's rotation. You can rotate it around. Come on. And then if you click the one next to that with the little boxes at the end, that one's scale, and you can see that changes the scale of it. So let's see, got that. So while you have one of these selected, I want to point out, look at the go ahead and look at your inspector while you do that, and you'll notice that it changes the values inside the inspector. So when I move the scale one, you see the X change on the scale, which is really important. The gizmo is really just a different way to edit these values, but those are the same values. You could edit on the menu on the inspector, or you could use these gizmos.
That's really cool.
There's one that's to the right of the scale, and it makes these green dots appear on it. Yeah, so when you spawn the cube, it automatically starts out with this. This one is kind of cool because it's kind of like scale in that you can grip these ends. Whoa, come on.
Just with trigger, holding the tooltip.
Yeah,
And
so
you can...
you can grip it with a trigger, you can pull it out, and you can do other things like grab these ends. You can do this really cool scale where it scales the whole thing in a very easy fashion. This is a nifty gizmo you can use for like really shaping how your primitive objects are.
Hold on a second. How do I use this?
You're gonna click on one of those dots and you're gonna hold the trigger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think I've ruined my box.
Oh yeah. Great time. Well, we're supposed to go about it in a bit, but undo. So in your radial menu in the top left, you'll see undo. Go ahead and click that. Very important thing.
There we go.
You can also redo right next to it. Hit redo. So always remember there is an undo button.
I'm not very sure how many actions it lets you undo, but pretty many.
Pretty many. I would agree on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I also wanted to point out that the concept of local and global position. So check this out. So if you go and click on position, so Leaf, go ahead and hit the position gizmo. Hold up. Go ahead and hit the position gizmo. That one. Okay. So if you do that position gizmo, I want you to look at your inspector while you move it on one of the axes. And you'll notice that it actually edits multiple values. Like when I'm moving on this blue axis, which would be the z-axis, it's actually editing the x and z numbers on the inspector. The reason why is because right now it's being moved on the local position. And what that means is that with this game object, it has this concept of parent that we'll talk about later. And wherever it is, it has its own local coordinate system of the z, x, y axis. And you can see that visually if you on the gizmo. You'll see next to the left of the position, you'll see this box. If you click it, it turns into a big sphere, and that signifies that it went from local to global like a globe. So now if you click on one of those axes, like the z-axis like I was doing earlier, you'll see now it's just doing the z-axis. So in other words, what's happening is when you look at that position is in terms of the global position. It's in terms of the global position coordinates. So like these axes here are aligned with the same axes that these numbers correspond to in the inspector. And meanwhile, if you rotate your cube, outside of what that axes are, and you switch it back to the box or the local position, now you'll see it moves on the local axis. So that's what the local position is doing as far as the gizmo goes. It allows you to move it on its own reference of X, Y, Z.
If you move it with local, the arrows also move.
Right.
Global, the arrows will just stay with the world directions.
Exactly. That right there is the end of the first section. So, Leaf, do you have any questions?
Yes. Wait,
There's one
hold
more
on.
thing here. This gizmo is the nothing gizmo.
it's nothing.
Oh, okay. That's actually what I was going to ask.
Really?
Is how do I? Yeah, I was gonna say, how do I grab it again and then rotate like this? I guess you just push that one.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so that's our first section. Now to get in the meat and cheese. The inspector. Oh yeah, it's break time. Let's take a quick little break.
If you don't have water with you, then get some.
Go get some water. What a beautiful sunny day out.
The sun going down?
Yeah, there's a stick you can use to move the sun.
Oh my god.
Oh god, it's so bright. All right. Camera's rolling. Here we go. All right, welcome back after that wonderful break that we took. So here we go. We're going to start talking about that very daunting looking inspector, which I promise you, once you have a more fundamental idea of what's on here, it'll be a little bit less daunting. Looking at this, you'll notice there's two sides. So Leaf, you got your inspector. Awesome. Whoever's watching, definitely pull up your inspector for the cube or box that you made. Beautiful. So we got the left side. On the left side, it's called the root, and it's got a directory of the game objects. Can't really see much on it right now, but if you click the, we'll talk about it a bit later, but real quick, Leaf and whoever's watching, click the up arrow that you see on the root box, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of our game objects, right? There's this whole hierarchy of game objects, and that's how you navigate it. Now, go ahead and click on that down-looking arrow on the right side of the top of the inspector that's next to the green box. Click that guy, and you'll go back in where you were. But right now, I just want to point out that this side is dedicated to navigating your hierarchy of game objects. It's like being on your computer, like Windows, and like looking at the file directories. It's like that. That's the left side. The right side is where all the properties and components are. In NEOS, it's called the slot. If you're familiar with Unity, that's what you would technically call the inspector. But here in NEOS, this whole thing's inspector. So your root is on the left. It's where you navigate your stuff. And your slot is where all your properties and components are. We're going to be talking about three general types of components. Basically, there's components that are for rendering or making it so you can see it. There's components that are for collision and interactions. And then there are components that are basically programming. If you've heard about logics, that's basically what the third type of components are. They're basically programming just like logics, except they're in component form. So we're going to go over all the components that are on the slot box.
So every component is bold text with a green D and a red X next to it.
Yeah. Each component is, you can see where it starts, where you have the X and the D, and you see the title of the component. And literally the end of the component is when you see the next X and D, or it literally is just the bottom where you see attached component. I'm going to be very, very, very real and say that this is very confusing to a new user. And within like the traditional game environment of like Unity, you'd see a very clear like box to define that that's a component. But in NEOS, this is what you got to work with, is you just got to look for the X and the D to know where it begins and ends. But the general concept of what components do is that they have this script that's running. Like there is this programmed script of each component and what it does, and it's got a bunch of variables that go into it. And you can see those boxes with like numbers, and you can put in information there. So those are all basically scripts, right? So with that said, I want to go talk about active at the top of your slot, render tag. So when you click active, I want you to look at your cube or box. You'll notice it's gone. It disappeared. What happened is that when you clicked active, you told the game object to stop running all of its component scripts. So if you go and click active again, it appears. And you'll see that right under it, we got a box mesh and we got a mesh render, right? I mentioned earlier that we have these components for rendering. Those components are for rendering. So if we go and click on, there's another thing I want to point out about running called enabled. Every component has an enabled checkbox. So go to Mesh Renderer and click enabled.
Oh, hold on a second. There we go.
Yeah. So you'll notice when you did that, that this mesh, you still see it selected, but, it disappeared, right? It's because you told the mesh renderer script, which is for which renders that mesh, you told to stop running. But unlike the active, there is a very big difference in that only that component, the mesh renderer, stopped running. The way you can know that is if you scroll to Box Collider, which we'll talk about in detail later. If you click Character Collider, which is going to make it so that you collide with the collider, I still collide with it. And that's important because if I were to go and just deactivate the whole thing, then I can pass through it. So active turns off all the components, and enable is just that component. So we'll go turn back on our mesh renderer, and if you had clicked on Character Collider, on Box Collider, make sure you uncheck that. We'll get to that later. So there are some properties that are on every single game object you will ever touch. And we're going to go over those. So the best way to see that is to make an empty game object. So go ahead and create new in your radial menu. And when you do the create new, you'll see at the bottom this empty object that you're going to go click on. And I want you to go click on that and make that. So you already have that? Awesome, Leaf. So here's your empty object. As you can see, there's nothing to see there except the point. It's just a point in space with no components. So let's go over.
Box from scratch, aren't we?
Oh, yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yeah. For everyone that's watching, yes, there does exist videos out there on how to do this. But this video is a bit more of a. It's not just about making an object. We're going over all the holistic concepts in here, including making the game object, because it's a really good way to show how to go and use all the components and selecting and navigating your hierarchy. So, yeah, just things to consider. Anyways, so here's our empty game object. So what's in there? Name and tag. Yeah. So you'll see at the top that there's a name, and it's called empty object. But we can give it a different name. So let's go click on that and give it a different name. I'm going to call it thing. You're welcome to name it whatever you want. Or are you naming it, Leaf?
Hold on. I'm going to call it Future Box.
Future Box. Wow.
Ooh, I can see the letters being typed in live on the inspector as he typed it.
All right, so that's the name. All game objects have names, and as Chill pointed out, looking in the root, you could literally see the name of the object. So you can see now on the left, it's called whatever you named it. So that's the name of the game object. All game objects have a name. They also have a parent we'll talk about later, but the next thing that we're going to talk about is tag. So the name is a bunch of text characters called a string. For anyone that's not familiar with programming, tag is the same type of data. It's a string. So if you click on it, you can go and put in something. So I'm going to just call this tag for the tag. And what tags do is that it's a piece of information you can use to identify this for things like searching it. There are like logics that you can use to search for that game object based off its tag. A really good example is like people have glasses that you can snap on the people, and it's like it's checking the tag. It's not the same. It's a separate piece of data from name. So I could have another game object with a different name, but it could have the same tag. So that's where tag's useful. Persistent. So persistent is whether or not this game object gets saved when you like save and load worlds. So with most game objects, you typically want it to be persistent, right? If you built a world, you'd want it to save. But not all game objects are things you'd want to save, because I mentioned before that everything is a game object, including these users, right? Me, Leaf over here, Chilla, we're all under these game objects. And those game objects are not persistent. So meaning that when you save the world, it doesn't also save our game object with all of our network data, our avatars. You don't want to save that. That's something that you don't want to be persistent. So that's what persistent is. If you want to save, make sure it's persistent. So we talked about scale, rotation, and position, or AKA transforms is what they're called in game development. So those things have these nifty buttons. If you look down here, if you go down a bit further, there's reset position, reset scale, reset rotation. So you can see for yourself what they do by clicking on it. So if you hit reset position, oops, I just realized it's actually on the empty game object, but that's fine. So it goes to the center of the world because that's the 0 point of the world. It's putting at 0, 0 or 0, 0, 0. So let's go undo it, put it back where it was. If you hit, reset rotation, as you can see, it sets it to 0, 0, 0. And scale, instead of saying to 0, 0, 0, sets it to 1, 1, 1. So that's what those buttons do. They're very, very, very useful to have. Let's see what's next. Okay, so jump to is something that I did not know about until Chilla pointed it out. And I'm like, oh, whoa. These are really great. So jump to. So here's my game object thing, right? If I go take my menu and I walk over here, and I'm like, I want to go work with thing, I can click on right below create pivot to center. There's something called jump to. I want you to click on it. And if you click on it, it'll take you to the thing. So if you're not sure where your game object is, you can have it bring you to the game object. So go ahead and do that, Leaf. Take your menu with you, away from it, and then click on jump to. And it'll take you to the thing.
Yes.
All right.
You have to hold the menu because
Oh, yeah. The menu does not follow.
No, it does not. This is a silent sleeper, really useful, but you can do the opposite. There's bring to. So let's say I walk away from it, and I'm very fine with moving the object. You can click on bring to, and it'll bring the object to you. So yeah, those are really, really useful for if you're going through your route and you're looking for game objects and you're like, where is it? You can use that. We are going to talk about the create pivot at center and parent under world root later when we get to parenting. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to delete the object. We're just going to go and we have it. We're just going to hit that red trash can and it deletes it. Great time for questions. Leaf, you got any questions?
I do, but you're probably gonna tell me that we're gonna learn it later.
Just ask.
What's the pink trash can?
Oh god, that's a great question. I don't think anyone knows that.
Yeah. So they're supposed to be different. Basically, if you take your cube and you grab it and you open your radial menu and you see destroy. So if you click destroy, what it's actually doing is it's clicking the pink trash can on it.
Okay.
The red trash can is supposed to be different in that if you have this game object and it's got materials on it, The materials are game objects too, and they're supposed to be saved somewhere, right? So if you delete it with the red trash can, it's supposed to, like, it's supposed to go delete everything, including what's storing in terms of references. And I could be very wrong, whoever is watching this video, but and then meanwhile the pink trash can is supposed to preserve the references like materials. But here's the thing: we literally tried to do the thing that Probable Prime showed, where you go and take out the material and delete it. It's like, yeah, look, you know, the reference is preserved, and when you use the red trash can, now the text, you know, the material disappears. But we literally couldn't replicate it. So I think it literally just got outdated. So for right
That
now,
was 2 years ago.
I would just assume that they're basically the same thing. It's
Okay.
either trash can is fine. But if you really hate that game object, you know, you can always hit the red one because it indicates you're angry. Okay, awesome.
You don't really need the empty object anymore.
Oh yeah, we're not going to be dealing with that for now. Well, if you really like your empty game object, keep it. I feel like things kind of endearing, so I'm going to keep them.
If you've grown attached to your nothing, you can keep it.
All right, so go ahead and put your empty game object to the side for now, because right now we're going to go back to the box. There's something I want to point out. There is a question mark box, and it does show
I've
information.
never tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried reading that, and I
What is it about?
had no idea what it was talking about.
It's Scene Inspector help, and it talks about some stuff involving Scene Inspector.
Oops. Sorry.
No prob, no prob. There's a lot of information on here. There it is. It's like, it literally says, red trash can at top right will delete the selected object. Where is the pink one? Does it say the pink one somewhere? I don't see it. It might be in there. There's a lot of information. But, if you're confused, there is that question mark box you can click.
And scroll it with my hand.
And let's find out what this does. Boop. Oh, whoa. Check this out. So.
Oh yeah, it makes it relative to you.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's a good one to know. So yeah, if you hit this, it like tags it on you, or sets it so that it's just always moving with you, which can be really useful.
God, I cannot believe I didn't know that.
Dude, that's the thing. You literally, there's so many things to know. That's, yeah, like.
You can have multiple too. I didn't
Whoa. Whoa. Does it rotate with you, Leaf?
Helpful.
If you rotate yourself to, it rotates with you. That's cool. All right.
It's totally, I guess it's parented to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, it disappears if it disappears from the word root. That's probably somewhere on your avatar.
Yeah. So we'll get to parenting later. Yeah, you can do that and it parents it to you and it moves around. So what I want you to do is grab your good old inspector for the box that you made earlier. If you delete it for whatever reason, go make a new box. You can never make too many of them. Until you get to like 100, then it starts to lag. I mentioned before that we got components for rendering, components for colliders, and components for programming. We're going to talk about the rendering ones first. So, box mesh. So, what is a box mesh? I think the easiest way to explain it is literally take your developer tool and point on the box mesh, like right next to the green D, and grip it. And you'll see this green mesh. What is it exactly? A mesh is a bunch of points in 3D space called vertices. Vertices. And these vertices have lines drawn from vertice to vertice. And these create these triangles or faces. And so when your graphics card is rendering this mesh, what it's going to do is it's going to go and render each triangle and it's going to go and render each triangle with a material, which we'll talk about in a moment. But that's the shape of your 3D object. So your mesh is the 3D shape. That's the important thing to know about it. So now the next thing that we have is the mesh renderer. And as you can imagine, it renders the mesh. But as I mentioned before, there's the shape of the object, but there's also the material of the object. So you need not only the shape of it, but you need to also have what it's going to be painted as. And that's what the material is. So materials are a really, really important concept to know. So I'm going to drill down into it just a tad bit. So what is a material? A material is, well, let's pull this out first. So if you go over here on PBS, metallic on root, and you grip it, you'll see this sphere pop out. That sphere represents your material. So Leaf, go ahead and do that and grip it. And I want you to point away from any of your UI and click the trigger. That is the material. So before we talk about, much else about this, what you're looking at here is a material. And a material is a shader where, as far as rendering goes, shader is low-level code that determines what color to paint a pixel. And what a material does is it's a configuration of that shader. Shader is, as I said, it's programmed. It's got variables that are inputs, like, for example, color, albedo color. This is data that goes into it. And you can save that data, a configuration of it, and that is a material. It's a configuration of a shader. And you can see up here, about the fifth line, you'll see underscore shader. That's the shader that's being used. In NEOS, one of the limitations you gotta be aware of is, unlike VR chat, you cannot bring in custom shaders. You're limited to the shaders within this app. God forbid I'm wrong here, but my understanding is the reason why is that you can't compile anything in NEOS. So if you wanted to bring in another shader, you'd have to compile it. So you got to work with what's inside of NEOS. And there are plenty of really great shaders. So you see here we have a static shader on shaders. There's our shader. So I mentioned about how you can change the color of it. So I just want to show that real quick. So if you click on albedo color, if you go over to the right, you'll see a white box next to the A with the 1. I want you to click on that. It pulls up a color wheel. So you got that, Leaf?
Yep.
So go ahead and set it to a color. I made mine red. Are we controlling the same box? Oh,
we're controlling both boxes.
Oh, no. We're controlling the same material.
Oh, right, because it's the...
Yeah. So we're controlling the same material. So this is really actually, even though there's two of these, they're actually referencing the same material. So yeah, that's a great example of how you can, it's a shader and you have input data that's coming in. And when you change a color, it changes the albedo color with the RGBA values. And you can change that. And you can see it changes. So that's a material in a nutshell. Really briefly, I want to point out, you probably noticed that there's a whole bunch of other stuff on here. There's albedo texture, emissive map, normal map, occlusion map, detail normal map, all kinds of other stuff, blend mode, etc. That's a lot of other stuff that goes beyond the scope of this course. I wanted to drill into materials very briefly, just to point out it exists, because it's a very important part of rendering stuff. But I just want to briefly show what a more sophisticated material might look like. And I want you to be aware of where they are. So Leaf and whoever's watching, I want you to go open up your menu with your inventory. And I want you to go to, where is it? NEOS Essentials. You're going to go into NEOS Essentials, and inside of there, you'll see materials. And I want you to click on materials, and you'll see all kinds of different folders of materials. I'm personally going to go with bricks and choose CCO textures and just choose one of these bricks. Looks nice to me. And there we have it. We have a more sophisticated material we can use. How do we want to do this? Okay, so we can apply it in the inspector by taking that material, and if we go and drag that material onto where we see PBS metallic on root on the material list, it'll apply it. And as you can see, it's got a lot of cool stuff going on. So let's go and, again, what you saw earlier, hold the grip on that material in the inspector, click off to the right, and you'll see that material inspector pop up. And you can see here, it's got a whole bunch of our textures. And this is the thing I wanted to go and talk about that's very important for people getting into NEOS or game development in general. If you hear someone say material and you hear someone say texture, those are not the same thing. Those are two different things, and they're very easy to confuse for people that are new to it. So I mentioned a material is a configuration of the variables that go into a shader. A texture is really just one of those variables. It's more specifically, if you go on Albedo texture and grip it, it's a image. A texture is an image. And this material has inputs for these images of textures. And you can input that, and you can see if you were to go in and just mess around by hitting clear on some of those textures, you'll see how it changes. Again, I don't want to go too much into what each thing is because that's outside the scope of this course, but just know that this is a whole little rabbit hole you can go down into, is materials. They can get very complicated, very intricate. Like this cube, you can see like depth to the bricks. And that's the magic of using these maps. So, tint. Oh yeah, so very important thing. So if you're in NEOS and you want to design stuff, you got this library materials I just showed you in NEOS Essentials. But let's say you want blue bricks, right? Red bricks aren't good for you. Well, good for you. You can click on Albedo color that I showed earlier. And lo and behold, you can make it a different color. Hey, get out of the way. Shoo. There we go. Great. We got blue bricks now. So tint.
So basically the entire texture will be tinted blue or whatever color. But also you can change some cool stuff on that too. Like there's transparency on this.
Oh yeah, transparency is probably a real good one to know.
Or glow. That's also cool. So now it's shiny.
Yeah. We probably should quickly show transparency because I feel like that's kind of a fundamental thing for people.
Yeah, so basically this slider is transparency, but it doesn't really work on opaque, which is
to say it's not going to be transparent. Okay, so blend mode is when your graphics card is rendering this. It's got a whole bunch of 3D, it's got a whole bunch of triangles that we talked about earlier, those faces. It needs to figure out how it's going to blend everything together. Right? Like, see this cube, from my perspective, I had it in front of that yellow cube. And you can see this blue cube being rendered in front of it. Well, it's got to figure out how to blend these pixels together. So that's what blend mode is. And opaque is solid. You're not going to see through it. But if you click over, you see there's things like cutout you can mess around with, and there's things like alpha. So now, there's alpha, there's transparent. I'm not super familiar with them right now, and like I said, it's outside the scope of the course, but if you want to make it transparent.
Now, on this slider now, it's all the way over there, but basically now the slider works. So if you want to make it transparent, just put it to transparent.
Put it on transparent. And, as I mentioned before, there's all kinds of things. Additive, multiply, People that are familiar with Photoshop, some of these things probably sound a little familiar. It's like layer blending or something like that. It's something you can do with layers to make it how they blend. But it's the same concept. So if you want to make it transparent, just know that you can put it on transparent. But there's a cost to it. Just know that if you have it so that it's transparent, you're going to have to render more stuff. Because from my perspective here, this cube is in the way to every cube. It's blocking every cube. If I have it on transparent, I'm going to be able to see the every cube. So I'm going to have to be able to draw more triangles. So it's just worth knowing that transparency looks cool, but just remember there is a graphical cost for it. All right, so I have it as opaque. I would put back as opaque. Okay, great. So we have our material on there. Like I said, this is a whole rabbit hole we can dig into. Just like programming, it's a whole rabbit hole of stuff. But I just want you to be aware this exists. You can change the tint of it, and if you want to make it transparent, you can too. If you ever want to mess with textures, feel free on your own time. So now you know about materials. Great.
Well, can I just show something real quick?
Sure.
So basically, how the workflow would be is you have this tooltip, which is the material tooltip, and you can apply materials just like how Roasty showed. Is you go into the materials and then you just click on it.
Oh, that was another thing. Yeah,
And
you can
click on
grab
that.
it and click on there. Yeah, that's another way. You don't have to drag it. You can hold it in another hand and you can click on it.
Change the
Yeah,
material.
so that's how you change it in the inspector, but obviously you're probably not going to be pulling up an inspector for everything you want to set a material on. So basically there's this tooltip for it, which is if you put the material in it, you can just click on things and it does it.
Right.
And now if you see in the inspector, if you actually pull this out, you can see that that's what it is. It's the marble.
Exactly. So material tooltip lets you do all the stuff you did in inspector, but the workflow is a bit more simplified. So just reiterating what she just said, here's my material tooltip. You can put a material inside of it. You can click on a thing and it's going to apply it.
How do I take the material out of it?
So if you grab it, if you grab there,
You don't
with,
have to.
oh, you don't have to. Oh, you just click
You
secondary.
just
My
get
bad.
the tooltip, and with secondary,
So just
Yep.
point at it with the material tooltip, hit the secondary button, and you'll just you'll literally just extract the material. Boop.
yeah.
And-
now if you want to edit this material, like if you want the edit panel that you saw before, you go into the radio menu and click on edit material, and then you'll have this same panel. The
Exactly.
material that you just extracted.
How
So,
do I get the material out of the tooltip?
so you
yeah,
can
just grab it.
you can just grab it.
Oh,
It's a ball.
okay.
You can grab
okay.
it. But yeah,
You just,
so
like,
edit material. That's like a really good one to know because it is a pain in the butt to go find it in inspector. So radial menu while you have the material inside of it, and you'll see edit material. That's a really good one to know. So remember what we just saw earlier, where Leaf and I were editing the albedo color of our original cubes and how it changed both the cubes. Well, that's because they were the same material. Both objects were referencing the same material. So the way you can get around that is you can create a copy of the material. And so you have a whole separate material. So if I have this material in my hand right now with this blue bricks, I can open up the radial menu, and in the bottom right, you'll see create copy. And it creates a whole new one. So if I edit the material that I had originally, and I change the color to, say, purple, you'll notice that while it changed this brick that I had, it didn't change the other. That's a very,
changes
very important
everything
thing.
That reference from this one, but everything that references from that one will stay blue.
Exactly. So if you're making a world and you're thinking about changing colors and changing materials, it's very important to remember that when you're referencing materials, they're like a central point of information, And if you change that central point, everything that references is going to change. And if you want a separate material with separate colors and properties, you need to make a copy. Or make the other thing you can do is you can make a new material. So if you take your material tooltip and you open a radial menu, you'll see a create new in the bottom left. So go ahead and hit that. And you'll see there's a whole bunch of different options. Real quick, you'll notice there's a whole bunch. We're not going to go into this very much, but just click any of them. Here's like, I can't pronounce that, ZZ Tune Material. This is an example of, more cell-shaded kind of material. But you can see that it opens up a whole material inspector and all the stuff is null. You'll notice when you make new materials, there's a lot of stuff that you take for granted. It's already pre-set up. We're not going to go into it, but just know it exists. You can make a new material. If you're designing stuff in NEOS, which Leaf, I know you're going to do a lot of designing, materials are a really good thing to know. That's why we drilled into it just a bit, because you're probably going to want to know how to make different 3D shapes look different with textures and stuff. And again, the very important thing is textures do not equal materials. I just want to make that very, very, very clear. Alrighty, so let's move on to the second type of components, colliders. So I talked about what a mesh, a box mesh was earlier. The mesh, right? If you equip your developer tool in case you switched to your material tooltip, go to box mesh, you grip it, and you'll see a 3D mesh, right? We talked about later. But for right now, box collider. So you see that box collider, that is what that is. Now, unlike the mesh renderer within NEOS, you can't really grip it and see the collider. You'll just have to trust that a box collider is, well, literally a box, just like the box mesh. But you'll see over here that there's some properties you can see, like size. And the size is pink. We'll get to it later, but that is the size of your box mesh. That's how that's being defined. So the very important thing I want to point out in box collider is character collider, which I clicked on earlier to demonstrate. So I want you to click on character collider and walk into your box. You'll notice if you walk into the box, you can't walk past it. The reason why is because even though you can't see it, your avatar has colliders on it. And it's detecting that your body collider is colliding with this box collider, and so you can't walk through. So now go back over here and click on character collider and disable it. And once you disable it, I want you to go over to your cube, and you notice you can walk through it. So, all right, you see that?
It also makes it climbable.
Yes, you can climb it.
Turn off grabbable first.
Yeah, so,
Turn it off.
okay, turn off grabbable. Yeah, so you'll see this grabbable component we're going to talk about in a bit. So first, go ahead and turn it off on enable. So unenable grabbable, and when you go over here and you grab it, right now we can't climb it. So you need to turn on character collider, and voila, you'll notice you can climb it. So if you want to make a world where you can climb stuff, make sure that the character collider is on, so you as a character can collide with it, and make sure grabble's off. And you can see you can climb on it. You can also do janky stuff like pull yourself inside of the object if you want to be really hacky on stuff. But that's a pretty cool thing about NEOS, is that if you can set up things to be climbable. So have you tried that yet, Leaf?
Disable it? Or character collider. Okay.
You check that, and grabbable has to be disabled for this one, because it can be grabbable and climbable at the same time. Well, it can be, but it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. Yeah. Don't want to do that. So now that you've disabled grabbable, you'll notice that unlike earlier, if you grab the cube, you can't just move it around your hand. So let's go back and disable character collider. And right now, I literally can't grab it at all. The only way you can grab it at that point for most game objects is you take the developer tooltip, and you're going to want, you want to go and select it, and you want to move it around. If you can get the very, very center of it, you can grab it. Well, so anyways, yeah, if you have a game object and you don't have grabbable on it, that's what you have to do to be able to move it. But anyways, so let's go turn on grabbable. So enable grabbable again. And now if you grab it with your hand, you can grab it. Great. That said, grabbable, what's really happening when you do grabbable is it's actually detecting the collision between this collider and the colliders on your avatar's hands, which, real quick, I want to show, there's something called edit mode that will let you see it. So go ahead and open up your menu and go to session. Go to session, settings, and then to the right, you'll see edit mode. And click on that. And if you look at your hands, you'll see some spheres on them. Those are what's being used to detect if you're colliding. And so if you go over to your cube, you go over and you grip it, you'll notice it's red. It's showing that it's colliding. So that's what's actually happening. We'll talk a bit later, what exactly is going on in terms of the game objects and parenting. But for right now, yeah, that's collisions. You're colliding your hand collider with the game object's box collider. And to further illustrate that, go to your box collider and hit enabled. And now that you have the box collider disabled, try to grab it. You can't. Because lo and behold, now there is no collider for your hand to collide with. So therefore, the grabbable component can't work unless you have it an enabled collider. So this is what I was talking about is important about active and deactivated, right? Because if we disabled the mesh renderer, I still can grab the game object. I can still grab it. You can see when I move it around, it changes the position.
Select it.
Oh yeah, I should select it. Yeah, there we go. You can see that I can grab it still, even though it's invisible. But if I instead deactivate it, I literally cannot grab it because the box collider and the grabbable component are both deactivated as well. So those scripts aren't running. So that's like a really important thing I mentioned about active, is just being aware of how it plays in the components. So that is a box. That's our box collider. That's our grabbable. You'll notice there's a lot of little things on grabbable, like edit mode only. If you click edit mode only, we're in edit mode and we can grab it. But if you go back and you turn off edit mode, you can't grab it. It's a really good way to make it so that things you don't want to grab don't get grabbed by accident. But that's a nice little thing. So let's go ahead and turn edit mode only back off. So that is grabbable. And gizmo link, what is that? And pasting them into the size of the box collider. And you'll see if you look in value copy, you'll see a size. You'll see input that says size on box and box mesh on box. You'll see size on box collider on box. Real quick to illustrate the idea, if you disable the value copy and you scale it, I made it smaller and it was previously big. If I go and put my hand here, oh, that doesn't work out very well, does it? I guess if I disable it, it still copies the values. What? Okay, it's small. I have it disabled, and it's still pink. If I make it bigger, yeah, I don't know.
If you delete it, you want to try that?
Yeah, we can try that. Let's try doing that. Boop. Okay, so now it's not pink. So if I make it small and I grab up here, if I make it bigger, it's there. I don't think it's that. I think it's something else. Oh no. Oh yeah, it comes back. Okay, so you can undo and get your component back. So if you delete it, it's not gone forever, but it will go at the bottom of your slot. So here, I think it's more so this. If you go to box mesh and you change the size of it to like 5, then you'll see the size update on the box layer. That's what it is. That's what it is. So this is more so to anything configuration. If you had like a procedural mesh, and that you can, procedural meshes are meshes that we talked about earlier, but you can change them. When we grab it, we're changing the game object scale. Remember that general property. But we're not actually changing the box mesh. But you can change the box mesh size, and that's a separate thing. So that's what that value copy is doing, is it's copying the size of the box mesh and pasting it into the box collider. So you know that they are the same box with the same dimensions. That's what that value copy is there for. Anyways, yeah, that's enough regarding that. Let's see what happens if we disable it real quick. If I disable it and I change the size of the box to 5, that's interesting. So it looks like even if we disable value copy, it looks like what's going on is that even if you unenable the value copy, it still functions. So remember what I said earlier about how that's like a thing that works on all game objects with their components. If you disable it, stops running. Well, apparently I'm wrong. I guess in the world of NEOS, not all components do that. So tread carefully. Apparently sometimes if you disable it, it doesn't actually stop that script from running. But if you delete it, it does stop. Because if we were to go and delete this value copy, and now it's no longer updating the box collider, which you can see it's not purple anymore, and we go over and change the size to 5, was it character collider? And you can see I only bump into that, original 1x1 cube. If you're doing some sort of component that involves like updating values, look for the pink or purplish looking boxes, and that'll tell you if it's still doing it. So, value copy, I click enabled, and it's still updating, and you can see that it's pink. So, any questions?
So when the sizes are pink, it's because they're being pasted from somewhere else?
Yeah, those values are more...
They're being controlled from
They're being controlled.
one way or another.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can edit them yourself, or can you?
Let's find out. No, it just gets updated.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Nope.
All right.
Wait, yes. Wait,
Oh.
hold on. I have a question.
Yeah, please.
What does the yellow arrow and the yellow star do?
We will get to that later.
Okay.
That has to do with parenting. That has to do with parenting. Guess what we're about to do, Leaf?
Is it parenting?
No.
No.
Damn it. What are we gonna do?
We're
gonna
gonna
make
make a
box?
cube from scratch.
Okay.
Woo!
Good.
It's time to apply all that
My
knowledge.
future box.
So, any questions before we do that?
Nope.
All right, awesome.
How are you?
How are you? How are you feeling? Let's go
Yay.
get the empty game object that you hopefully didn't forget about, or make a new one. Whatever works for you. Go into the trash can. Goodbye. All right, new empty object. I don't have much sentimental value about thing. You know, it's just a thing. All right, so make yourself an empty object. And you got your empty object ready, Leaf?
Yep.
All
We're
right.
gonna add a component.
So the first thing we're adding is the box mesh. So this is, in my opinion, one of the really tough parts about NEOS. Go ahead and click on Attach Component at the bottom of your inspector. And you'll see there's a lot of different things. Asset, audio, cloud, common UI, etc. A lot of stuff.
By the way, this is not it. You can scroll this down.
Oh wait, there's more!
There's more. And at the bottom there's cancel.
Yeah, if you really don't like your menu, you can hit cancel, but personally, I feel like the edgy response is you grab it and you delete it. Yeah, go away.
You destroy it.
You destroy it.
Troy,
Destroy. So yeah, we're gonna do attach component, and the first one we're gonna add is the box mesh. Because it's very easy to forget. Chilla over here put it on this great list of stuff to do. It's an assets, procedural meshes, box mesh. So I think it kind of makes sense, right? Assets, there's stuff like, objects and whatnot are assets. Click on assets, and you'll see procedural meshes. Click on that, and then you'll see box mesh, and you're going to click on that. Voila. If you go and grip on the box mesh, you'll see your box mesh. It's there. So you got that, Leaf?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so that's our first component. Now we need to render the mesh. So we're going to go to rendering, mesh renderer. So attach component, rendering. So we render it. And we're going to go click on...
Over there.
I always forget. Mesh render. Render to mesh. Great. So now that we have the mesh render, you still don't see anything yet. But the reason why is we need to grab the box mesh. Remember that green mesh? That indicates you're holding a mesh. And
We need to tell the mesh renderer what mesh exactly it needs to render.
so we need to drop the mesh in the mesh slot. Voila. Now we have a box. You
Now
can't...
the box has a box shape.
But you'll notice it's got a checkerboard pattern. And that's because it needs a material. So this is basically saying error, I don't have a material. So let's give it a material. What do we put on here? Let's just go take one of our existing materials that we already made. So we take a material, and we can, as we talked about before, we can go click on it while it's in your hand. But wait, we need to add. So you have a list of materials, go add it in there. Boop, done. So that's how you go add your material. You'll probably notice a big difference between what you have here and the other one on the box mesh is that over here you see a bake mesh, and over here you see a bunch of statistics, mesh statistics, vertex count, and whatnot. So if you go ahead and click on bake mesh, and it's going to bake the mesh. I am going to be real with you. I do not know exactly what it does. I know within game dev, you can bake lighting, and it basically pre-computes values and saves it. I'd imagine it's something like that. It probably helps all your performance. The main thing I notice is if you want to know your vertex count, triangle count, and etc. on that mesh, that's what you have to do to see it. So just keep that in mind.
Only thing I know is if you have something that is made up of multiple meshes, you can bake them into one thing.
Oh.
But it will not it will be optimized because simply having one mesh instead of 3 is better. It's easier. for the computer, but it will not get rid of like triangles that are like if two things are intersecting, the triangles will not disappear. They will still be there, but at least it's one mesh.
Okay. Um, so again, as far as just like materials, meshes are something you can drill down to. Like it's a rabbit hole. Anyways, the next thing we're doing is we're gonna give it a collider, right? We want to be able to collide with it. So you're gonna go to attach component, and where's this one? So remember I mentioned about colliders being game engine physics? Well, it's in physics. So click on physics, colliders, and box collider. And so the next thing you need to do is you need to make it grabbable. So go ahead into attach. It's a grabbables. I'm gonna be real, a little unintuitive, but it kind of makes sense, I guess. So remember I mentioned about how position, rotation, scales, transforms? Well, that's where it's at. It's in transform, interaction, grabbable. And there you go. Now it's grabbable. I mentioned before it's a little intuitive because you'll notice if you open up your add component, there's something called interaction, and there's literally just grip pose reference. So that's something I've gotten confused on a lot. Just remember, you're messing with the transform, and it's an interaction. So that's how you make it grabbable. And then the final component is the value copy, right? Because we talked about earlier how you need to update the box collider if you were to change the mesh size. So go to attach component, and I literally don't know where this is. Transform drivers. Okay. So transform drivers, and in here, if you scroll all the way down, you'll find value copy. There's a whole bunch of other useful stuff in there as well, but that's like for your own time. That's beyond what we're doing. So when you click on value copy, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of value copies, and it's like uint3, ulong, int3, etc. We need float 3 because each one is a float, which basically means it has a decimal, and there's 3 of them because there's 3 coordinates. So click on that one. And now we have your value copy 3. You got that, Leaf?
Yep.
All right. So now, in order to go hook it up, we need to go and hook up the source. So we have the box collider. So not the box collider. We have the, where is it? Oh. Okay, so remember I talked about baking your mesh? Go ahead and delete that static mesh that you created. Turns out that we actually don't want to do that. Because if you do that, I remember I talked about procedural meshes and how you can change them. Well, when you bake the mesh, you can't change it. So go ahead and do an attach component again, assets, procedural meshes, box mesh. There we go. So the box mesh, there we go. So the box mesh, you can change the mesh real time. So we're going to want to go and take your cursor and put it on size. And if you grab it, you'll see it's blue and it has the ID. You want to drag that into the source for value copy. You got it?
Hold on. What, the size?
Yeah, so right here. Yeah.
The thing that says size.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can grab the float 3 by hovering over the size, not the individual X, Y, Z, but the size.
Sorry, I scrolled.
That's the source?
That's the source. And you drag that into source. So that lets the value copy go, okay, I want to reference the box mesh size, and it's grabbing that.
Do you need to add back in the mesh into the mesh renderer?
Oh, yes, thank you. So yeah, because I deleted the previous mesh, we need to go put that back into the mesh renderer. So let's go put that back in there. Boom. Now, voila. Yeah, so yeah, Leaf already did it, but I'll show whoever's watching. So we slot it in the source, the size in the box mesh. We want to do the same with the box collider. Grab its size and drag it into the target, because that's the target you want to target with the value copy. And voila, now it does that. So now you have your whole cube. It's all set up. Add target and source, check scalable. Oh, scalable. Let's see.
Because by default, for some reason, like if you try to make it bigger with holding it with both grips, it doesn't work.
Which one was it?
So just find, it's over there.
Okay, so if you try to go and grab it with 2 hands without scalable being checked, you can't make it bigger like you saw with this one. So to do it, to make it scalable, you have to click on scalable. And now it scales. And voila, now you've made your own cube. Just quick food for thought for both you, Leaf, and whoever is watching this video. So I mentioned about rabbit holes, right? We have a rabbit hole of, looking into meshes and materials. There's a whole rabbit hole of components.
Okay.
I think the nature of how one should look at NEOS is to be explorative. Feel free to take exploration and look around. Transform, interaction, and transform drivers is full of a lot of cool stuff. I recommend you go take a look around in those places on your own time. Assets is full of good stuff. We saw earlier procedural meshes. You'll notice some other stuff around there like materials, procedural textures. Those are all real good things. And yeah, it's just worth noting. Oh yeah, and then rendering. Your rendering is obviously full of a lot of good stuff, because when you want to render, when you want to make stuff visual, you got to render it. You can see stuff in there as well. I just want to point out that exists for, where you can expand upon from here. You can never know too many components in NEOS. That is kind of one of the big floors, is that when you start out, you don't even know what components exist. At least right now, you know how to make a cube, and you're aware of their stuff existing. But if you really want to get nitty gritty, it's important to go take a look around. Just be aware of what's kind of out there. All right, we're going to take a break, get some water. All right, you back, Leaf?
Yep.
Are you ready, kids?
Aye, Captain.
All right, so I have good news. We're past the meat and cheese. Now on to the other piece of bread. This is not going to take much longer, but it is very important. So, I mentioned about kids. We're talking about parents. Let's talk about parents. A very, very, very important concept involved with game objects. So what is it? Parenting is basically grouping things together in a hierarchy. It's best demonstrated by going over to your state inspector for any of your objects. Let's say your empty object. And if you go and click on the up arrow, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of other objects in that root. You'll see the top object is the root. Guess what? The root is the root of everything. It doesn't go any deeper than that.
Yeah, so basically the drop down arrow means that whatever is under it is parented. So everything here is parented to this.
So arrows let you see the children of those parents. But you'll notice over in the slot, I still have empty object selected. If you look over on the second, remember I mentioned earlier about the parent? Well, if you see on the empty object, the parent is root. Well, that's because the root is the parent. That's where it's at. Now we're going to show you some cool stuff. So take your cube you just made, and I want you to go duplicate it. So now you have 2 cubes. Make that second one a little bit smaller so you can differentiate it. So you have 2 objects, right? You can see...
The object, which is the big one.
Ooh, let's make them different names. Empty object. So we're going to call this...
Small cube.
Small boy. Small boy. And this one's called big boy. All right, great. So we got the big boy and the small boy. So right now you can see on both of these guys that their parent is the root, and you can see them in the root. But we're going to do some nifty stuff. I'm going to go and parent the small boy to the big boy. So you're going to go over in the root, and you're going to grab the small boy, and you're going to drag it on the big boy. And you should see the small boy disappear, and you should see arrow next to the big boy. And if you click on the arrow, there's your small boy. It's now a child. You can see in the slot that the parent now says big boy. Okay, so yeah, you have your small boy parented to your big boy. You can see it in the parent slot. Well, let's undo that so it's no longer parented. I'm going to show you that you can also use that to parent it. So if you grab the big boy and drag it into the parent field of the slot of the small boy, instead of root, now it's big boy, and you can see in the root that it reflects it. So you can do that for parenting as well. So here's the thing I want to point out about parenting. What is it? So as you can imagine, kids inherit stuff from parents. So I'm going to do that thing again I just did. Parent. So I'm going to make the big boy the parent of the small boy, however you want to do it. Now you can see it's parented. So it inherits information, right? So if you go and grab the parent object, you'll see the child object moves with the parent. Because the child object inherits the transforms from the parent object. However, the child object does not inherit, the parent object does not inherit from the parent object. So if you grab the child object, then you'll see that the parent object doesn't move. I mentioned that it was transform. So that literally means all three properties: position, rotation, and even scale. All of those things get inherited by the child objects. So something to point out about, remember we talked about position, rotation, scale? So let's take a look at this while we actually move this around. So if we move around the parent object, then you can see that the position, rotation, and scale don't actually change for the child object, or in this case, the small boy, right? And meanwhile, if we grab the small boy and we reposition it, it does change. And that's because these properties, position, rotation, scale, are relative to the parent. That is like a very, very, very important concept to remember. So if I were to zero out this position, rotation, and scale, check us out. Reset, let's do reset position. It goes inside the parent because now it's zeroed out inside the parent. So that's like the really important thing to know. So that's transform. The other thing that gets inherited from the parent that's really important to know is active. Active is very, very important to know about because check this out. If I, what do we have down? Okay. So if I click, if I'm on the big boy or the parent and I click active and deactivate it, you can see both the child and the parent object disappear because the parent object deactivated, but the child also deactivated. But get this. If you go and look at your child object, the small boy, you'll see that active is still checked. So even though it's being overwritten, even though the parent object is overriding the child object and saying, hey, you're deactivated now, that doesn't change that property from being checked. So if I go and re-enable the parent object, the child object does not change the value for active, but so that lets you do stuff like going in child object, and you can click on active for that, and it only deactivates the child object. But meanwhile, the parent object, if you go in activate and deactivate it, it doesn't stop it from being still deactivated. The reason I want to point this out, and it's really good to know, is that when you're programming your world to do stuff, it's important to think about things in terms of activating and deactivating, because with what you need to know is that if you create objects, you have to go and create objects into your memory, into your computer's memory. But if you just make all of your objects and you just activate and deactivate it, it's way more efficient. And it's really way easier to control because you don't have to worry about your hierarchy changing. Everything, all the game objects stay where they are. The other thing is that it affects your parent on the game objects, right? You see under name, there's parent. Well, that can be used programmatically. You can navigate through the hierarchy and you can look for parents. So that's the other thing that parenting does. Now, let's go and look at some applications of this stuff. So create pivot at center button. So we talked about that earlier. So look at this right here. We have these two objects, right? And if I grab the parent object, if I select the parent object, let's do that. Deselect all. And select the big boy.
Let's just mention why you would need this.
Go ahead.
Like, for example, if you want things to spin.
Right. So if you wanted to go and rotate this whole thing, then you're going to, if you wanted this to rotate about the center, there's actually a really easy way to do that. So if you select your parent object, and you'll notice that when you do that, it's showing that the position it's going to do is actually over here, which is not on the center. We want it to be on the center. So what you'll do is you'll click on your parent object, and you're going to go click on right under reset scale button towards the top. You're going to click create pivot at center. And when you do that, you'll now have a new game object, if you look up here, called Big Boy Pivot. So if you double click on that one instead, let's deselect all, double click on that. Uh-oh. Oh my God. There we go. All right, so if you notice that you can't double click on the root, try to double click on something else in the root. Deselect and then double click on that object in the root. Okay, so now when I double click on this new object, Big Boy Pivot, which if you open it up, you can see that the big boy and the small boy are all parented. You can look here and you see that the transform is in the center. So if I were to go and hit the rotation gizmo, now it rotates about the center. So if you have some crazy thing you make in terms of like a bunch of like objects and you want to make it rotate about the center, this is a really easy way to do that. So, okay, so the next button I want to show is the other one that we talked about on all game objects called parent under world root. So let's, okay, so you made that pivot, right? Well, now deselect all of it and go and click on your original parent. So in my case, Big Boy. Now, let's say that you want to go and parent it to the root. You don't want it to be parented under wherever it is. Well, you can click on the button parent under world root, and it does that automatically. So now you'll see that Big Boy is no longer parented to Big Boy Pivot. It's now back under the root.
Okay.
Yeah, this is basically if you were to grab it, like just grab it and pull it under root, it would do the same thing.
Yeah, it takes care of making your root the parent with just a click of a button. Great. Now we can talk about the buttons, Leaf. Oh, I know you've been waiting for this moment. Buttons. For everyone who's watching, I'm sorry we had to wait, but I'm sure it all makes sense now that you learned it. So we have two trash cans. It's mentioned before. I don't know what the difference is between them at this version of NEOS. Who knows if they're actually different? Maybe they are. But that either one of them, you destroy the object, you delete it. So up arrow. So up arrow creates a parent object. So for the selected object. So if we're on Big Boy, hit the up arrow, voila, we have a Big Boy parent. Let's try that out. Great. So you have that. Now, if you're still selected on your original parent object, big boy, now hit the star. What that does is the opposite. It creates a child object. So if you want to easily create parent and child objects, those buttons do that for you.
Yeah, and these are also empty objects.
Yeah, they're empty objects. Oh, wait. Yeah, they're empty. Yeah, they're empty. And so, can you guess what the green button does? I sure do. It sure. I'm being sarcastic. It's not obvious at all. It's duplicate.
It's not.
It's duplicate. Why, frogs? Why is that duplicate?
Nothing is obvious.
Nothing is obvious. Maybe 2 cubes. It's like, look, I'm making another one. Or something. Maybe you have an up arrow and a down arrow for star instead of child.
Cubes?
Who knows? Whatever. There you go. Up arrow is parent, star is child, and cube is
And it
duplicate.
everything.
Here's a question: can you edit your own inspector to like change those textures of those things?
The answer is yes,
Yes,
Leaf.
you can
Yes.
Ah.
So when you teach people how to use this, how to use NEOS, you use the default tools because the default tools are going to get updated as the game gets updated. However, there are people in this community who take the time to make custom tools. So I'll pull out one, for example, that's got some cool functionality, and you'll see in NEOS stuff like this. So here's a custom one that exists, and looks like this. The nice thing about this is you see how I have this selected? Well, there's actually a really cool way you can deselect it. Come on. If you swing your hand and hold trigger and grip, it deselects it. There's like a hitbox around your hand, it deselects it. Also, as a programmer, I really like this. If you open up your radial menu, you'll see Open Dark Inspector. Ah! Ah!
I honestly don't understand people's obsessions with.
Listen, Chilla. Would you
People
have to
stare at white screens for very long periods of time?
Who thought looking at a white screen was a great idea? Not me. Also, check this out. Over here, this is kind of a little beyond the scope, but I mean, I just want to point out some differences. So there's a scroll bar over here on the right, which is really nice. Remember how we had to drag? Well, now you don't have to click and drag. You have a scroll bar. You could just like click to the top.
Do you have a scroll bar on these? Nope.
Nope. But you probably could. Probably. I think this has this whole system of tabs. So it's like, here's root. And it's like, I could go in here and, what is it? I could like navigate and like, check this out. I can, go back. Okay, I have 2 tabs. And like this tab, I'm going to go into box. I'm going to, make that my root. It says box. Now I can click back over to root. You can save where you are, and you can clear all your tabs. So as you can see, there are definitely perks of these custom tools. They look fancy. You can make them look unique. You can have these custom inspectors that have nifty features. But, God forbid, this app updates, which I literally just got an update when I got on. It updates like almost every day. Your custom inspector tools might get destroyed. Like in terms of there's just they're not going to get destroyed. They might break. There might be things that are in there that don't work correctly that don't get updated. Because again, they don't get all of the updates from the official support tools. So just word of caution, but they are nice. They're very, very nice. But
Yeah.
I guess I like the Dark Inspector. I think the tabs are pretty useful.
Yeah, the tabs are nice.
But was there something else? Okay, so back to your original dev tool. So there is another there's another thing that's on old game objects that I didn't talk about that we're going to talk about right now. Under scale, you'll see something called order offset. So do you have here, Leaf, do you have something like this where you have a bunch of game objects under a parent?
Yeah.
All right, so make sure they have different names. So, big boy big boy 2. Okay, so we have 2 game objects, right? So you can see on the hierarchy over here, or the root, that it's in the order I created it, right? I have my original big boy, and then when I made the new big boy, it put it below the second big boy. But you can actually control that. So if you go to order offset, and you make it so that it's a value less than all the other game objects,
Okay, that makes sense.
it puts it at the top. So it's put in order from smallest to biggest. So I put in -1, and now it's at the top. The reason this is good is because there exist components and logics where you can search your hierarchy for a game object, like find this parent, get its child. But you can't get a list of childs. You can only get the first child. So if you want to make sure you get that child, you want to have at the top, you can use the order offset to control it. The other thing that's really important to know is that if you have a UI, like UIX, when you make UI, it actually renders your UI in order from top to bottom. So in this case, I have, big boy number 2 over here and big boy 1, right? If this was UI, then big boy 1 would render first, and you can see it in front of me, and then big boy number 1 would render second, and you'd see it render in that order. You'll see components, and this is outside the scope of it, but there's components like vertical layout group, where it's like, you'll have stuff listed in a vertical column like you see on this inspector, and the order it gets listed is based off of that hierarchy, which you can control with the order offset. That is why order offset's important. And then, okay, so remember that thing we talked about earlier on the gizmos that I said we'll talk about later, that up arrow? Well, now we're going to talk about that. Does it go up? Hold on. Deselect it, just hit this child object, and now hit the up arrow. Okay, so try double clicking it. Yeah, there you go. So if you do that, it selects its parent object. So I had the small boy, and I double clicked that arrow, and it selects the whole thing. We're gonna go full circle here. So remember grabbable, and I said okay, moves a position, but we're gonna talk about it later. Well, now we're talking about it. So when you have this thing grabbed, I want you to go and take your object and put its inspector next to it. So here's my big boy 2, right? Look at the parent and look at the root. When I grab it, it disappears from the hierarchy, and you'll see the parent now says holder. That's really, really big, because if I were to go and click the up arrow on that, check that out. When you click the up arrow next to the parent, it makes a whole new inspector. That guy right there. Try doing that while you're holding it.
When I'm holding it, push the up arrow?
Yeah, while you're holding it, click that up arrow on the parent. That up arrow will spawn a new scene inspector based off of where that parent is. Okay, I got it. And I press up arrow. Okay, I'm confused. Okay, that's my original menu, and this is a new one. So it makes a holder menu. But if I do it with the right angle arrow, and is it literally the same thing? It looks about the same. Well, whatever the case, if you want to go get an inspector where that is, where a holder is, click one of those arrows, and it'll pull it up. So if I grab it, you'll see on my holder that it gets parented the holder. And that is somewhere inside of my avatar, which we're going to talk about that big up arrow leaf that you asked about at the beginning. You can see it gets reparented. That's basically on my hand, on my avatar's game object. It gets reparented there. But that's what's happening. This is a really important concept to know, because if your world if you're designing your world and assuming that you have your root. And under your root, you have your box that you're messing with. And you grab your box. Like here's this box right here, right? Over there. It's like if I grab that box. So here's this box, right? You assume the box is in the world root. And maybe you're doing stuff to the stuff under world root. But if you grab it, it disappears. It's now parented under my avatar. It's really important to know that that's what grabbing is doing. You're reparenting it to that. All right, so the final thing. So see over in holder. Leaf, do you have your holder inspector open?
Yep.
All right. We're going to do the big up arrow on the left. Click it. And you'll see your avatar is now the root. I don't know exactly what it's looking for with a big up arrow, but it seems like if you're inside of an avatar, like you're in a game object that's under an avatar, it seems like if you press the big up arrow, it knows to stop at the root of your avatar.
Well, I
So
guess the next route above it would be the world. So
it's weird because, well, no, you do it again and it goes to user.
It goes up to my user.
It goes to your user, and if you press it again, it goes to the root. So I tried to look at it and figure out how do I, okay, if I make a new game object, where does it stop? I don't know what it looks for. It doesn't look like it looks for a tag or, name. I'm not quite sure what it looks for, but it seems like it works really well for avatars. And that, again, if you are, if you're doing this, right? If you select your hand, if you want to get into your avatar, you can, select your body, like by hand, open inspector. It's like collider. And I can press the up arrow, and now I'm at my avatar. And I press the up arrow again, and now I'm at the user. Again, if you double click the user to go full circle, look at persistent. It's not checked. That is how this world knows how to not save it. There you have it. That's this course. Any questions, Leaf?
I don't think so.
There's a little more.
Oh, what's up?
Just what I mentioned is if you want to get into a workflow, you wanna build a world, and you got a bunch of objects. You don't actually have to go into every single object's inspector if you want to make them collidable or grabbable, because that takes a long time. And there are special tools for that in the essential tools. Let's start with grabbable setter. It's kind of orange.
So grabble setter. What else?
And then there's a blue one that looks exactly like it, except it's blue, and it's called character collider setter tip.
Blue. Yep, got it.
So grabbable setter, it's this orange one. Basically, whatever you click on will be grabbable. And to make it ungrabbable, you press secondary. So now this is not grabbable. Can't grab it.
Press secondary. Click it. Now it's grabbable. Secondary.
Yep.
Ungrabbable.
That's
So
it. And basically, there's one thing. If you get the radio menu, there's one set scalable.
oh,
Is
for what? What for which one? Oh, the character. Sorry, the grabbable. So if you grab it, there's set scalable. So what we talked about earlier was set scalable. Right now we can scale it, but if we set scalable, now you can't. Wait, what? Nani?
Radio menu.
Radio menu?
On it. Click on. There you go. Now that's a configuration on the tool. Now it's purple. See?
Oh, okay. So it's a configuration of the tool, and now when I click it, now it doesn't scale. But if I set it scalable, now it does. Okay. So that's like a workflow you can do. And then this other one, what we got going on here, Chilla?
Collider thing. Now this one's got a bunch of things. But basically, if you click on something, it will have a collider. You can't. And
Does
the
it
secondary-
set character collider on it?
Yes, character collider. Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, if you click
Which
it,
means you can't
character
walk into
collider.
it, and it will become climbable.
So yeah, you can disable it by doing your secondary, and you can enable it by clicking it. But yeah, the general thing I want to point out that Chilla's pointing out is if you look in your NEOS essential, your my bad, your essential tools, you'll see there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's like mesh tip, there's like snap sphere, ruler, there's all kinds of stuff. Those are basically tools that simplify the workflow that you saw you could do in the inspector, but they make it simpler to do. That should be it, right, Sheila?
Yeah, there's one more thing. There's a glue tip. I'm just trying it out. If you want to make, like, you got a bunch of objects and you want them to be one thing, basically glue them together. You get a glue tip and you put this circle around them. Now everything that is in this, sphere will be glued together.
Wow.
So what is happening, though, in
It
terms
just
of
makes
inspector?
an empty parent object above them, I think.
Oh, let's see. Glued? Ah, so it parents them all together. Okay, so that seems to be a good way to parent.
So one mode is to parent objects, and then there's also big meshes, which is the one that
That's how you can
mean-
combine your meshes, right?
yeah, it will combine them into one mesh.
I see. All right. Anything else, Chilla? Or is that all, folks?
That's all, folks.
Hey! All right.
Hey.
Anyways, for whoever's watching, thanks for watching and following along. I know it's been a long journey, but as you can see, NEOS is very dense. There's a lot of stuff you got to get past. I mean, over the course of this, we talked about the developer tooltip, just how to select stuff and do all that. Inspector had a lot of things you had to know about, and of course, parenting had a lot you need to know about. So, where do you go from here? Like I said, there's a lot of places you can drill down. You can drill down into meshes and materials. There's a whole lot you can do with that. You know, specifically procedural meshes and materials. You can drill down into programming with logics or using components. My suggestion is that if you're going to look into programming to make stuff do stuff, I think it's important to learn logics because it's like they're fundamental tools you can use to build anything you want. But you'll also have to know about components because, as I mentioned before, components, there are some things that you can't do otherwise without components. A really good example of this is, I think it's like box, mesh, and it's like interaction. No, whatever. There exists a component that's like volume meter that lets you get the volume of audio source, and you can take that audio, output it as like a float, and you can use that to drive your logics and make things audio reactive. But like you need to know that the components involved exist, and you also need to know that if you're going to make things of logics and you want to make your world performant, you need to know, okay, are there components that can do that for me? But this is all honestly outside the scope of what we're doing. And then finally, as I mentioned, as far as the components go, there are so many components. Please take a look around in the components. Like I said, look around in transform, look around in assets, look around in rendering. Those are good stuff to look at. And the last thing is know about your available assets and files. We mentioned before about NEOS Essentials and how there's like materials inside of there. There's all kinds of folders that exist out there, public directories like Starter Pack. Definitely be aware of what's at your disposal because that's how you can just make stuff with existing game objects. And that's it. I'm done. I don't got anything else.
Yes.
Goodbye.
There's one more
Alright.
thing you must do when you're in NEOS,
What?
which is have fun.
Hey!
Hey.
No, seriously. Try to remember how fun. This shit gets very frustrating. Goodbye.